Everyone, it's Charlene Lee here, and I'm excited today to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is about power, and in particular about redefining power. One of the things that we've been talking about, what I talked about last week, was about the need to give up the need to be in control because you realize there's a fallacy, this whole idea of being in control. And today I want to extend that other idea, which is, well, what is the source of power then? If it's not about control, and how do you what is actually power today, especially with power being torn apart and expressed in so many different ways. So we'll look at some of the academic research about what are the bases of power and how that applies to today. And very importantly, how you can start applying power, gaining power, accumulating it, and then using it. And in particular, about how you gain more power so you can get more things done. So, just to begin, would love to welcome anybody who is joining today to, first of all, share where you're coming from. Would love to hear where you are. And also, what is your relationship to power? How do you think about power? Do you crave it? Do you want it? Are you one of these people who live and think about how you get power? Or do you have a mixed relationship with power? It's something that you feel like it's potentially a dangerous thing to have, and having too much power and especially a small number of people is not a good thing. So you don't really want to think about power in that way. So I think today what we're going to be talking about is what are these sources of power? And in particular, how do we think about it in a new way? How do we redefine power in a modern way that is very well suited for a digital, not so hierarchical world? So, want to say hello to a few people who are joining. So, thank you so much, Santosh, for joining. Dr. M, good to see you again from India. Nikhil from India, and Nelson from Nigeria. So, very international group right now. What I would love to do is, again, just continue to say where you're coming from, but also share what are you thinking? How are you thinking about power? What are the sources of power that you really rely on and lean into? So let me get into this discussion about why power even matters. If you think about it, leadership is about the gathering and the exercise of power. And power is what allows you to influence people, again, because you don't really control them, influence people and determine the outcomes. So the thinking about how do you develop and establish these relationships with people, and then the sources of power in order to influence people so that they take action. That is what power is all about. And strong, effective leaders know how to accumulate power and then also how to use it at the right times. So you think about this gathering all this power, making sure that you have the resources and the relationships that are strong enough so that when the time comes, you can give the command and things will happen, outcomes will come to pass. And the thing that really good leaders do is that they're actively looking at the landscape and thinking, how am I going to get this power? Where are the sources of them? And they're thinking strategically and very intentionally about how they will build their power bases. And this is where I think it's extremely important, because the way that we think about power and the new sources of power is extremely important in this brave new world that we have. And especially because so many things are changing right now, I fundamentally believe that the reasons why we feel so disrupted is when we are separated from our basis of power. We feel disrupted and have the world seem like it's disrupted when the way that the world works, the power relationships that we have with the people and the institutions are being torn apart. And until we put them back together again and we establish where power is coming from, we are going to continue to feel disrupted. That is why, as a disruptive leader, it is so crucial for you to understand, where does your power come from? What are the sources of your power? And in particular, how will you continue to cultivate and refine and rebuild those sources of power? So a couple of things. First of all, what I'd like to do is just, first of all, just see if there's other people who have joined to say hello. So quite a few other people have joined here. And again, ask your questions about power, what your relationship to is, and then as we go along, I'll try to take as many of those questions as well. So Laura, thank you so much for joining, and you have a great comment here. You're in New York. Thank you so much. Uh, Power is a shared natural resource, and we grow it all together. We're going to definitely talk about that today. So very thoughtful point to make there. Keldan, thank you so much for joining from Maryland. Esmeralda from Colombia. We have John coming in. Let's see, lost the link here. We have Ava from Phoenix. John, I know you're here someplace. John from Texas, here we go. Marla Lynn from Victoria, BC, beautiful place to be from. Nasser from Iran. And let's see, we have Nilda from Argentina, Hilma from Nigeria. Oh, and Hilma, you have a great comment here. You have mixed feelings about power. Believe it's necessary to get things done, but then should it be how to show how decisions affect us based on the use and hold on power? So we're definitely going to talk about that. And again, I think oftentimes, depending our cultural backgrounds, our societal backgrounds, I know that as a woman, power was not necessarily something you were told to go after. It was a very male kind of dominant thing to do. And as a woman, do you want to have power? And absolutely, you want to have power. So we'll talk about this in a little bit. We have, let's see, Ricardo coming from Mexico City, and hi, Kenan. Hi to you too as well. All right, let me get into the meat of what I want to talk about today. When you think about power, there was some great research done way back in 1959 by French and Raven. And one of the things they talked about were the 5 bases of power, and they actually expanded it to 6 bases of power. And I'm going to expand this a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. And they had the 6 were legitimate, coercive, and reward, referential, expert, and informational. And you can divide these two into 2 categories. One is positional power. So the information there on the left is about, these are types of power that are based on your position primarily, your hierarchy, your place in the hierarchy of an organization. So legitimate means this is your title. You're the director, you're the VP, you're the CEO, you're a manager. And that gives you legitimate power because you have this title. But then there are also reward and coercive types of power. And then this is the ability to give a reward, or coercive, meaning unless you do something, you're going to get punished. So the types of positions that you could have, the types of power you could have, even if you don't have that particular title, it's typically based on your ability to and access to budgets or to sanctions, to give rewards and coercions and punishments. So that's positional power. That's a very typical hierarchical type of power. But then you come to personal power. And this is something very different. And the best leaders combine positional power and personal power. Because if you only use positional power, it's a very cold, technocratic approach to leadership. The personal power, the most important one there was referential, meaning what is the reference, the relationships that you have with other people in your group. This is the relationship part. So people have strong references to you, they associate with you. And then there's also experts, people who are just really well known, and their power base comes from their ability to be an expert in the field. So they are the first and final word about a particular area. And if they say you should do things, you believe them because they're the expert. So their power comes from being an expert. And the 6th area that French and Raven added was informational. Because you have access to information, you're able to tell people, like, I know this is the fact. This is the fact, and this is the information. I may not be an expert. I have the facts, so here's the data. And we should do this because of that. Now, in the past, informational was more based on your position, because you were in a position to see information or to have access to information and data. You had power. But I put this now into the personal power stack because this is the area where more people now are actually gaining more information because of digital technologies. You think about what I talked about last week, the ability to have more control over things, be able to the inability to have control over things is correlated to the fact that people now have information and have more power. So when it comes to thinking about all of this, and I'm sorry, I had the banner up here from before. Let's see. I am trying to hide this. Let's see. Brenda has this great comment: "Power to inspire and grow in those in connection with your leadership" is a great comment there. Um, Monolyn also has a great comment here. "I believe others believe power is something totally different. We do have power to make decisions that impact only our lives, but the lives of others." So this is about the ability to control not only what happens to you, but also to many other people. So the other questions here, I love this question from Dr. M. "If there is no dependency with self, others, and material, then power, does it exist?" Great philosophical question. Um, Power again, if you and again with that question that Mona Lynn had just asked, which is, where does power come from? Does it come from yourself or does it come from other people? There is a power about in the control of yourself, the management, the leadership of yourself. And of course, that is absolutely important. But what I'm talking about today is once you have that, how do you exercise power and influence people around you? How will they actually respect the fact that you actually have influence over them, power over them, based on that relationship that you have? And that again, the relationship can come from being because you have a certain title or the ability to give rewards and punishments, but it can also come from your ability to have that relationship with people, to be an expert, or again, have more information. So, a little bit of technical background there, but I think it's very important to understand that because when it comes to the way that we think about power, it's actually looking very different today. And the simple reason is because of this. Let me just show this one other great graphic. It's basically making a point that if you think about the way that organizations are organized, it's traditionally a very clear hierarchy based on departments and the power dynamics between people in different levels and different departments. But if you look at the bottom part of this diagram, this is a concept of conceptualization of how work actually gets done. And it breaks across these hierarchies. We go cross functionally. We find people in different teams and places. We need to go and find experts in different places. We develop strong working relationships with other people. And this is the beginnings of this power shift. And the idea is that the power shift is so strong because you're having people now not based on these hierarchical positional powers, but again on this personal power. My ability to go find somebody who has the right piece of information in the company, develop a relationship with them, and then have again that source of power. And you see this inside of organizations now, where some people are just incredibly networked. They may be individual contributors, but because they're so networked into the rest of the organizations, they actually become power brokers. And this is the key thing to thinking about power. Because if you are in a position of power, you have a title, being able to tap into these networks, into the personal power, and elevate the power of people around you actually gives you more power because you're tapping into the personal power that you have. And you're tapping into the personal power of your extended network and making sure they have power too as well. It is no longer constrained by the hierarchies and the promotional power and the promotional timetables inside of organizations. You can now see power being accumulated and spread throughout an entire organization in ways that we could never have seen before. And a key part of this, I believe, is the fact that we now think of power not as something that's a zero sum game, meaning that if I have power, then you don't. If you have power, then I don't. Instead, what if you think about power as an abundance? as a resource that we can build, we can invest in and grow. And this is the key, I believe, to being a disruptive leader, that you are able to create this strong sense of power, of agency, of ownership across the entire organization, where everybody feels power, that they have power because they have access to information, because they are now the experts in what a user wants, because they work in the customer service area as a rep, that they now have these connections across the organization, that they are able to tap into those relationships and that referential power that you could never have had before. And so I think one of the key things I'm very excited about because of this is that the way that we actually build power it can be very systematically and intentionally done. So I'm going to give you three ways to be able to do this. The first one is to build up the referential power with recognition. Again, referential power means I have a connection to you. I have a the ability to find, identify, and connect with people in different areas. And the referential power is, again, these cross-functional interlocking areas and connections that people have. So I'm sorry, it's more about matchmaking, not recognition. Recognition is the second one. So referential power comes from identifying these connections across large networks. So building up the network inside of your organization through the use of digital collaboration platforms, through networking events, lunch and learns, where people are making these connections and getting power because of the people that they know in their network. The second way is to increase the informational power inside of an organization by giving more people access to the information. I was recently working with a CEO, and she realized that so much of the information inside the organization was held by a small number of people, the VPs and above. And they went through all the information inside the company and said, what are the places where we can give access to all of this information and not gate it, not block it, not have to make people ask for permission to be able to get that information? And they realized almost all of it could be made available. So they opened up the vaults, made sure people knew how to get access to it, when it was appropriate, why would they were using it, and train people on how to use that information so that they could get more power to make decisions directly rather than have to wait. And the third area is to focus on that expertise base of power. Identify people who have an area of expertise and develop that expertise and use recognition to say, hey, everybody, this person, expert, go to this person because they know how to do this. And then make sure they're tapping into the information and also the networks so that they're able to expand their power bases too as well. Now, this is a very different way of building power. It's not the traditional way of cutting things off, making sure people don't have access to information, because that was the traditional way of having power. It was the idea that information was scarce, networks were hard to build, that all of these things were difficult to do. So you would hold on to them. You would be really careful about sharing them with people, because if you shared it, you would lose power. In today's world, in today's information and data and networked world, the more you share power, the more you get it. And that's a different way of thinking. And so this is the key thing I want to walk away with. Want to have a few other closing notes before we close out. I just want to see what other comments we have here. Let's see, Brenda, just great in terms of saying, great, thanks for the examples of power that I'm sharing with you today. Jay is saying organizing around people and solutions. I love that, rather than these hierarchies. So yeah, I think what Tony Hsieh and his ideas around holacracy are absolutely fantastic. And that's a great suggestion, Jay. I would definitely take a look at that, and we'll talk about the benefits of holacracy, but also some of the pitfalls of it. Because if you don't prepare well for holacracy, the whole thing can fall apart. And there have been some stunning examples of how the right intent of holacracy was there, but it didn't work out so well. But the underlying idea from Tony is absolutely true and fantastic. John has this comment: we need to change the narratives of "I am more superior than you are because I'm your boss," and rather tap into the strength of your team members and converting ideas into reality. I love that. Power again comes from the ability to just get stuff done. And then, Laura, thank you for this comment. The upward spiral loop of growth and power via shared versus a limited perspective. I love that, the upward going spiral and the loop. And John, just another comment. The more information you share, the more you have of it. That's a great point. Thank you for that affirmation. So the last point I want to make today, just to close out, is uh, just talking about how do you grow your own power. And I have a particular interest in this because as a woman, as somebody from who was not white, obviously I'm Asian American, and it's so hard sometimes because in order traditionally to gain power in a positional traditional power dynamics of the places, I'm in a group and so many people are in the groups that are not in the in group. You're not in the group that is naturally building these personal types of power. You don't have the ability to necessarily tap into those traditional places. And so as a result, I found myself, and I know so many other people, just trying to fit in, trying to be a culture fit, and not trying to be different. And the terms of this are oftentimes when you walk into the office, you check a part of yourself at the door. And other things I have found myself doing is code switching. And the idea is that I may talk a certain way, I may act a certain way, but I will code switch to fit into the environment that I'm in. And all of this, again, is an attempt to fit in so I can start being accepted, being included, being part of the tribe, and therefore gain power. Because at some point, I'm going to want to use that power. And the danger for somebody who is not part of that inclusive group, who may be standing out, is that by standing out, you are losing power. You're using that power that you have been gaining for so long. And I know I talked to so many Asian Americans over the past few months with the rise in Asian American violence. They said, like, this is the first time I've ever wanted to speak out, had the desire to speak out. But at the same time, I'm so uncomfortable because my entire life has been about fitting in, not to be different. And I'm so afraid now that if I speak out, I'm going to lose power. I'm going to lose my standing. I'm going to be seen as different and therefore not be included going forward. And this is the reason I share this is that if you've ever felt like you have not been part of that tribe, and all of us have, it doesn't matter your background. It could be from education because you're new into an environment. It could be, again, you're just for whatever reason, feel like you're not included, and you know what it feels like. And if you want to be the disruptive leader, you want to make sure that everybody feels a strong sense of being included and feel as a result powerful. That power that you can share just by the simple fact that people feel like they're included because they belong. And the reason why I'm so passionate about this is that we oftentimes talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion from a numbers perspective or something you should do perspective. I believe this because the reason to do this is because when everybody feels like they belong and they are included, they feel like they have power to make change happen. And if you're going to be creating disruptive change, then you want everybody around you to have that sense of feeling too as well. So that's what I have today. And Laura, thank you for your appreciation for me sharing that the personal challenges of being Asian American and a woman. Again, I feel very passionate about these things and just wanted to provide that perspective again from my personal perspective and experiences too. What I encourage you to do is to think about what are your sources of power. Where do you get power from? And how are they strong? Are they as well developed as you would like them to be? Where are the bases of power that you need to shore up and reinforce? And then also, how can you begin to share that power to increase the power base of everyone in your organization? by thinking about power as an abundant rather than a scarce resource. All right, next week, I'm going to be talking about how to build trust in the digital age. So join me next Tuesday, June 1st. Can't believe it's already June, like halfway through the year of 2021. I hope you have a great week and I hope to see you next week. All right, take care.